It means there is something blocking, a barrier, as you mentioned, getting in the way of them naturally developing it. And the assumption is, well, if we just keep repeating with enough repetition, they will memorize it and it will become automatic. I have to tell you, even this hi, how are you greeting that everyone does, it's not automatic. I consciously have to be aware that I need to do that. Whenever I see somebody, I know I have to, and sometimes it's just shortened down to a nod or a smile, but because it's such a meaningless thing, and it disrupts my thought of what I want to say to that person, because now I have to shift to doing this ritual. Now I've forgotten what it was I wanted to say to the individual.
Most autism support focuses on what's difficult for autistic individuals. Here at Making Sense of Autism, we start by understanding how the autistic brain experiences the world. Welcome to our channel. I'm Staci Neustadt. I'm a speech language pathologist and I'm a student of Susan.
And I'm Susan Golubock, as an occupational therapist, but also discovering later in life my autism diagnosis. I'm the founder of Making Sense of Autism.
Welcome to our Making Sense of Autism channel. We talk about different topics each week, so be sure to subscribe. 72% of you watch our videos but aren't subscribed yet. When you subscribe, you get notification of when we bring a new topic to talk about. Today, I want to talk about a tool that many speech pathologists are familiar with. It's the CELF Pragmatics Checklist. Now, before we jump in, this isn't about criticizing the tool. I think every assessment tool gives us information. The question is, what information is it actually giving us? So as we shift towards a more neuro-affirming and neurostrength-based support framework, I found myself becoming more curious about what these scores really mean. I've worked with students who score low on pragmatic measures, yet when I spend time with to get to know them, I discovered they understand much more than the checklist really suggests. Sometimes they were anxious, sometimes they were overwhelmed, maybe they were even masking. So, Sue, I love to start with this question. When you look at something like the CELF Pragmatic Checklist, what do you think it's actually measuring and what are we missing?
I guess when I looked at it from a developmental perspective. Children develop those skills. They're not born with them. They do develop them over time. And when I'm looking at in that framework, I'm saying these are skills that they learn usually in a context. In other words, they make a mistake and they don't greet people appropriately. So what does mom say? Oh, here's how to do it properly. They learn through in context and through parent instruction, except for the last part when it comes to nonverbal language. That also is a very important form of communication that other people pick up subconsciously, and they read it, but autistics don't necessarily pick it up. Those are basically soft skills, what I call soft skills, things that no one teaches you, although parents could. Well, and in fact, my grandmother did this. Why are you always frowning? It's going to be permanent that way if you don't stop. So what did I do? I practiced in front of a mirror this, what my husband then called the Mona Lisa smile. But then I got criticized because, well, what's with it? Why are you, what's that smile mean? It's so frustrating because I had to deliberately practice facial expressions because it didn't come naturally or easily. And those are the underlying soft skills that without body awareness, kids can be taught, i.e., they learn to mask, i.e., cognitively, consciously perform. Any of those skills on that list can be learned as hard skills, but they still don't necessarily come naturally or easily
Yeah.
without a tremendous amount of conscious thought and awareness that typical people do subconsciously and are totally unaware. Once they picked it up, it becomes automatic.
And that's where I feel that the tension is. Like you said, autistic individuals can be taught every single one of those skills on the checklist, but to the detriment of their mental health, right? Because then they're feeling like I'm not adequate enough because you want me to do this and it doesn't come naturally. And I feel like the barrier there, as we talk about a lot, is when do I do this? Who do I do it with? Why am I doing this? Especially the,
Mhm.
even initiating conversation or the small talk of how are you? Why am I responding to how are you? Why am I asking someone, how are you? That is something neurotypicals do or not, some non-autistics do frequently, but autistic individuals, it is really meaningless and doesn't have it's unknown as to why they're doing it. So this is so important for speech therapists to know because I know on this checklist, whenever a student or a client scores low, then what do? You create a goal based on the ones that were no, no, no. And then maybe the student hates coming to speech. Maybe the student hates working on that goal. Well, because you're not looking at those soft skills, like you said, maybe it's body awareness. That's the barrier that's getting in the way. Maybe they get really nervous and don't want to join groups because the processing that is required in talking in a group is very overwhelming. So why are we forcing these skills that either they're not ready for or maybe they won't ever want to do? Um, and I think also, another tension is that these checklists really ask adults to rate behaviors that they observe. But as professionals, we know that a behavior doesn't always tell us really what's happening underneath. Maybe the student might not ask pure questions because they don't understand curiosity and why should I be curious
Mhm.
about that person? Maybe they avoid eye contact because they can't process the language while they look at them. And eye contact is such a tricky one because I, every autistic I've ever worked with gives eye contact, and it's usually in the context of, I need something from you, which there you go. That's why we all give eye contact, right? Like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
talking to
Mhm.
you. I need something from you. And I would say, then that's eye contact. Unfortunately, that whole idea of eye contact when I'm listening is more of a demand compliance thing. But as we've talked about many times, some autistic individuals can't listen while they're looking at someone. Um, so the checklist can identify those things, but it's not telling us why there's that deficit or why there's that barrier. And really, I don't even like to say deficit, it's more why there's that difference. And so, Sue, how do we avoid assuming that the low score automatically means there's a social communication deficit?
It means there is something blocking, a barrier, as you mentioned, getting in the way of them naturally developing it. And the assumption is, well, if we just keep repeating with enough repetition, they will memorize it and it will become automatic. I have to tell you, even this hi, how are you greeting that everyone does, it's not automatic. I consciously have to be aware that I need to do that. Whenever I see somebody, I know I have to, and sometimes it's just shortened down to a nod or a smile, but this, because it's such a meaningless thing, and it disrupts my thought of what I want to say to that person, because now I have to shift to doing this ritual. Now I've forgotten what it was I wanted to say to the individual. So it doesn't become automatic, and they shouldn't assume that it will become easy and automatic like it is for the neurotypical brain. If they just teach it through sheer repetition and what they call practice. So, um, being aware that it's always going to be something that's difficult for them. I all I ever wanted from other people was praise for the effort I put into things, how hard it was for me. I wanted acknowledgement. And if the therapist would just say, no, I know this is hard for you, but here's a skill. that I'm going to teach you, and this is why and how it works and what it means to other people, the who, what, when, where that you mentioned, then the individual is cognitively prepared because autistics pick things up on a cognitive level that they can't do on an easy or automatic level. And they are better prepared to choose when to use it and when to not use it. Everyone masks under certain circumstances for certain reasons, and that's fine. But masking 24/7 and being expected to mask 20, it is a mental health issue. So be respectful of, and this is what I did with one of my ADHD clients. I taught him all of the organizational executive functioning skills that he needed, and he still didn't turn his homework in. And so finally I told him there's one more thing to try. That's that's the end of the line. And he said, what? And I said, I am going to tell your parents and your teachers to not bug you, not remind you, not support you in any way. You have the skills when you need them to know what you need to do when you need to do it. And it's up to you to make that decision. And work.
Because it became intrinsic and he wanted
That's
versus it being a
right. Because
demand anymore, which that is social skills as well. And so if you've taught all of the skills, when you use it, why you use it, and the emotion piece too, you know, um, then they get that connection and that intrinsic motivation to connect with other people. And I know sometimes therapists will say, oh, my student or client says they don't want friends. So I would really push back on that because we are hardwired for connection. And maybe they're saying that because they haven't had success. It seems too overwhelming, too hard.
Mhm,
Maybe they want a social connection, but with somebody who also likes to just sit there and do puzzles or just listen to music, but not have conversations. So just
mhm,
because a student says, I don't want friends, doesn't mean I don't desire that social connection, because they do, but they
mhm,
haven't found someone who understands them yet. And so, you know, this checklist, it can tell adults what they're seeing, but it
mhm,
doesn't tell us what the student finds confusing, what social situations feel uncomfortable, what barriers are getting in the way, like our soft skills assessment shows you, what sensory or emotional factors might be impacting that social communication, what relationships do feel safe for them, or even what the student wants to learn as it relates to social communication, which is exactly what our social neuro-affirming social communication profile assessment tool does. So we do have a freebie, 8 social communication behaviors that you might observe and what they mean. And they are based off of our soft skills pyramid that we presented it in our conversation last week or a couple of weeks ago. These are those skills that have to develop before that social communication happens. And you might see certain behaviors. And we want you to really understand through the neuro-affirming lens what that means. So the link for the freebie is below. But it's so important that if you are a therapist giving social pragmatic assessment tools, to understand really what those tools are telling you and not to dive into just creating a goal based on their deficits, because you're going to be frustrated, your student's going to be frustrated. And I realize sometimes we have to give these assessments because you have to come up with a score. But at Making Sense of Autism, we try to help you interpret that tool through understanding what is the barrier that's getting in the way of this skill, and does the individual even want to, are they ready or want to work on this skill? What could you work on instead in this moment? So again, be sure to subscribe so you can join us weekly for these conversations, and learn about neuro-affirming assessments, learn about how the autistic brain works, so you can be more empowered with how you're supporting your autistic students and clients.
And
Thank you so
empower.
much. And empower them. Exactly. So thank you so much, Sue. It's always so inspiring to hear your perspective, and it's so logical. It makes so much sense, but we just need to keep listening.
Thank you for asking, Stacy.